So welcome back, everybody, for another episode of Politico with Juan, Collado, Díaz. And I want to welcome once again for a follow-up, Daniel Morgan Jr. And Daniel, do you mind please tell me a little bit about who you are, who's Daniel, and just share a little bit of your background and history?
Sure. Well, Juan, thank you for welcoming me back to the show. I sincerely appreciate the invitation. And to all your dedicated followers and new listeners, thank you for taking the time to be here. I would describe myself as an ordinary yet peculiar human being who loves God and cares for others. My existence is inspired and guided by sacred scientific and secular traditions and ideologies. As it relates to my professional and personal roles, I am an instrumentalist, a creator, a business person, a speaker, and a former honor student. But more importantly, I am a devoted family member and a loyal friend. Given that this show focuses on politics and this being a political religious episode in particular, I should mention that I've identified as a Democrat for most of my life, and I have been registered as one since I was 18. Although I consider myself to be independent, as my views include both progressive and conservative perspectives that go beyond traditional party lines because politics should not be understood through simple or rigid dichotomies, but rather through the nuances and plurality that exists. I admit, however, that my support, advocacy, and contributions are dedicated more toward progressive candidates and causes. Now, I may or may not agree with everything or everyone, but no one or nothing is perfect. And though not perfect, I believe they better serve humanity and all of creation across the sky, land, and water while honoring God.
Thank you, Daniel. And, this is a comeback from last year. We recorded an episode on February 25th of 2025, and that was the release. And it was the first part of a separation of church and state episode. And since then, you did share an amazing piece of work with me, and I wanted to just read it and then ask you some questions around that part. And it begins with, "My dear family and friends, for as long as you have known me, I've been recognized as a Christian, drawing understanding and inspiration by Baptist and Pentecostal beliefs, worship, and practices. For years, I have been quietly deconstructing and reconstructing, which has been thoughtful and intentional process shaped by different experiences. Over time, I've adopted more scientific and secular views and have become more open to other traditions and ideologies again. While my beliefs overlap in some areas with those across mainstream Christian branches and denominations, they also differ in others. Still, I remain a believer. This is my own decision, and it has been one of the best decisions I have made. I respectfully and kindly ask that my views and this process be met with care, understanding, and respect. Thank you for taking the time to read this." And then sincerely, you put Daniel Morgan Jr. And I wanted to ask you, last year, when we sat down and we had a talk, we went through a lot. That episode was very heavy, in your religious beliefs, and as human, you said it, you are human, as all of us. You have also shared how you have grown and come different to this. So if you don't mind sharing a little bit with me, since that episode in 2020 now, have your views changed on the separation of church and state?
Perhaps it may surprise some, but I remain uncertain as to how or whether my views have truly changed. Before and after our previous conversation was recorded and released, I found myself unsettled by some of my own thoughts or words and the way I had expressed them. It led me to question whether what I said truly reflected my convictions, both in substance and in delivery. And honestly, that experience remains one of my most significant regrets. Perhaps my views haven't so much changed as they have, in some sense, resurfaced, such as returning to beliefs, perceptions, or feelings I once held, but for a time set aside or kept to myself. More recently, I found myself revisiting those earlier views and seeing them as the most coherent and convincing to or for me. I don't think this is simply a return to the past. Perhaps it's integrating earlier views with the new ones. Many of these beliefs, perceptions, or feelings I had only expressed privately, if at all, and not publicly. But what I will share now is likely what I believed all along, though I haven't always had the courage to express it. Perhaps it is best for you all to determine where my views have changed or where they have remained the same after hearing me speak today.
Well, thank you, for sharing that part. And I know you during this time you have also written an amazing, lengthy but amazing piece of work, also an essay on the relation of Christian white nationalism and the effects that it has in our communities, right? And I will share this with our viewers and our listeners. The listeners, you will have access to this through the show notes at www.politicalpod.com, and this will be right there. The essay will be linked for you as Daniel has offered to share it as a public document, and you'll be able to actually see and understand more about what we're talking here. But I wanted to go off for a second and ask you through that essay, when you were writing that, and seeing all these views and how, like, white Christian nationalism has destroyed in many ways, the belief of Christianity of like God above man. Do you think that there's a difference between the teachings of God and Christianity compared to the goals of white Christian nationalism?
Yes.
Thank you. Now I'm going to move to another question that I have for you. And that will be, with everything happening politically, do you think now, today more than ever, we should incorporate a separation of church and state as a law or as a regulatory part of our constitution?
Yes, I firmly believe that the separation of church and state should be clearly and explicitly codified in law. And while there are rare instances where they can positively influence each other, the separation has to remain the standard.
And I agree with that. I think I shared this many times with you, as I share with other individuals. I think there should be a separation. And we have seen right now in our government, in our world, where that separation doesn't happen. And it's not only, I have to be very clear with our listeners and with everybody, because the main reason people believe in a separation of church and state is the attack of Christianity on a regular basis. And myself, as a probably non-religious individual who has many different beliefs myself, I will say that my reasoning for separation is not Christianity itself. It's the fact that I've seen in many other countries that do have a theocratic government, how they have failed because they have put too much time in believing in their religion over the need of their country. And we have seen how putting it only on one side, and that's why I believe they both should stay separated myself. And that's where I'm coming specifically. I want to make sure that people understand, this is not an attack on Christianity itself, or a standalone attack on it. It's a, hey, we need to separate church and state from all, like, and we use the term church because it's, the best term to make it sound better, but it is like literally every religious entity should be separated from the state political entity, as together religions will tell you right now that politics are not the way to go in religion. Christianity itself speaks very, very profoundly about that. So now, I know I asked you a question just a minute ago on Christian nationalism, but I wanted to ask you if you don't mind sharing a little bit on those thoughts yourself.
Sure. I would like to begin by sharing words from Frederick Douglass, one of the greatest men to have ever existed, which I find both compelling and relevant. And I quote, "Between the Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ, I recognize the widest possible difference, so wide that to receive the one as good, pure, and holy is of necessity to reject the other as bad, corrupt, and wicked." End quote. I shared that because that distinction is critical today. It still is. I want to say this loud and clear. I oppose Christian nationalism unequivocally. In my opinion, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Thank you. I agree on that 100%. I mean, otherwise, I don't think I would be here. Let me start with that. We have seen how the ideology itself has destroyed a lot, and how it has done so much damage to our country, how it has done so much damage to our current White House and previous, but specifically, I'm not afraid of saying it, on our current White House itself. And specifically, not just Christian nationalism, because I had a very interesting conversation not long ago, and I believe it was maybe multiple episodes, like 2 episodes before this one, and it was with Dr. Owen Anderson, who's also a pastor. Oh, and we talk about Christian activism and nationalism itself. And we were talking about how there is a difference between them, but also something that unites them in a way because some people, it's like, you have the radical left and your radical right in politics. You have your radical Christian like activists who become Christian nationalists. And what we have seen is, and there's many groups, and it's not just there's the most common scene is like the Klan or like Christian white nationalists, but we have to remember there's the Hebrew Israelites who are in the same position. They're in the radical like Christian belief, and I have myself encountered them as much as every other probably individual as of today. And for as much as it hurts me to say that I wouldn't like to encounter them again, but I actually would like to encounter them again and have many arguments with them, as I love to argue with people. But you also went a little bit you went in depth on your essay, a little bit of this, and it was how this movement itself threatens democracy and the rights of the people with different backgrounds. Christian nationalism. And do you have any other thoughts on that? Do you mind sharing something relating on how it threatens democracy? And I know, like, again, viewers, you will see this or listeners, I mean, you will see this on the show notes. I'll share the entire essay too for you to read through.
I don't mind at all. So this was a study approved by Dr. David Odell Scott and influenced by my coursework in religion, political science, and philosophy, to name a few. And this was a topic chosen for personal, academic, and professional reasons. It was a thesis focused on white Christian nationalism in particular, as you pointed out, which is a variant within the broader framework of Christian nationalism. I conducted thorough research, reflected on my experiences, wrote the words, and presented a comprehensive report based on the intersection of religious tradition and political ideology in the United States, specifically based on the notion that state laws and policies, as well as religious principles and practices, should be shaped by the identity, culture, and ideology of a single group. My paper traces the historical roots of this movement and examines how it manifests in contemporary contexts. I also explore potential future outcomes, considering both the implications of its continuation and the possibilities if it were to be challenged or dismantled. The project argues that white Christian nationalism forms a selective synthesis of religious and political elements. And this integration not only deviates from fundamental Christian ideologies and traditions, but also violates and contradicts constitutional guarantees or protections. And finally, I consider approaches aimed at fostering greater unity, inclusion, and progression, and at upholding a diverse and pluralistic society grounded in shared human beliefs, perceptions, or feelings, helping to prevent any single religious or political group that goes against liberty, morality, and democracy from achieving absolute power and control.
And I wanted to just add to that part. And I'm going to be sharing this too, but Yale University share a very nice, thorough, and in-depth also article on the understandings of specifically Christian white nationalism. And I wanted to bring that up because it's such like when I was reading it myself, I was like, whoa, there's such a history. We've seen it come forward now a little more. We have seen per se, white nationalism be more boom out there. But I also I have understand that it has been a history of it being where it is. And I myself, have to sit down and understand, whoa, this is even for me, this is deep. I have to go to find this stuff, and this is something that I never thought I would even know or see myself. So I want to make sure that people that are also listening understand where the return of this episode is, because in the previous episode, and I had a community member who spoke on the community side. That specifically, then Daniel, you were not speaking for the community, because I think your views, I think, as I said before, I don't think your views came from a place of malicious intent or even hate. I think your views were definitely on a place of understanding and being more open to the world, different perspectives. And you yourself has shown some growth, an amazing amount of growth on your beliefs from back then to now, and how how you visualize different aspects of Christianity. And your letter said it in itself. You are, and I love when you always say you're human. Growing, being human, is also comes with growth, but also comes with that understanding that our views sometimes may be, even when we express them, may sound like something, but they do not mean that. And I even myself had to put a disclaimer at the end of that podcast, the previous episode, to just let people know from my experience of knowing you at a personal level. Because I was like, someone's gonna just come and say Christian nationalist. I was like, no, for my experience knowing you, and like having sit downs and talks and amazing long talks for hours, I can even attest. I never seen that like Christian white nationalist or even just a nationalist in itself. In you, on the country, you're someone who, from my experience with you are ready to criticize our country if you have to, as you're also there to also give it praise when it needs to be. And that is what, to not really bring the full on politics, even though, this is a political podcast, but to bring that aspect is what makes a patriot, a real patriot, is to know, when our country's great, but also understand when our country is not great. And you have that understanding, and that's what makes a patriot, but also differentiates an individual who believes in Christianity from a nationalist. And I think that adds to this massive understanding of like where people stand politically, but also religiously into things. And with that, I wanted to also ask you a little bit on, mentioning this nationalism and how the Bible has been used to attack communities out there, Black and brown communities, minorities, women, LGBTQ plus individuals, and anybody who's not representing of what the nationalist Christians believe. This white, blonde, blue-eyed Jesus Christ, this brunette, blue eyes, or even some that's even blonde, Holy Mary, Virgin Mary. It's like, if you don't look like their poster child, you're criticized or even attacked. And I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about that, but also how you respond to things like that happening in front of you?
Well, unfortunately, that is true, and it's deeply troubling. It raises serious questions or concerns for me. Whenever I read the Bible, reflect on its writings, and talk about the scriptures, both in terms of its authorship and how it is interpreted, I find it upsetting that these texts have been used and continue to be used to harm communities such as the LGBTQ plus individuals, Black and brown communities, minorities, and women. At the same time, I think the issue may or may not be the text itself, but how people interpret and apply it. Even with my own independent study, diverse content consumption, religious and spiritual formation, and ongoing connection with others, I continue to grapple with these writings. I affirm my belief that God is the living embodiment of goodness, beauty, and truth. Sometimes, however, I have my doubts and wrestle with understanding why or how God created or permitted this complexity, which was one of the contributing factors in my deconstruction and reconstruction over the years. I can somewhat see the reason, yet it remains obscure. Much like my struggle with other matters of the faith and existence in its entirety. Despite these challenges, my conviction remains firm and I continue to believe the truth. I continue to believe in the truth, reliability, and enduring value of the prescriptive and descriptive writing in the Old Testament, the apocryphal or deuterocanonical writings, the New Testament, and even the Gnostic texts, despite the presence of clear textual and interpretive errors, difficulties, and complexities. And because these writings are subject to interpretation, that creates the potential for both good and evil. But if I were to witness this happening directly, I would hope to respond in a way that is grounded in ethics and morality to protect others from negative experiences. And while we often assume how we might act in those moments, the reality is that it can be difficult to know until we are actually confronted with it. But I do know that I wouldn't be indifferent. It frustrates me that these realities persist, that people's rights are still being challenged, and that harm continues to be justified in these ways. And at the same time, I recognize that people are entitled to their beliefs, perceptions, or feelings. However, those attitudes or views should never be used to justify the mistreatment or marginalization of others.
Thank you. And one question that I did have for you, in our last episode, and I brought this at the beginning, but one, and you even shared, your growth. In the last episode, you shared something that was interesting to me. You said Christianity was the one and true religion. Do you still feel that Christianity is the one and true religion still as of today?
No,
And let me ask you, and I'm sorry, I'm like throwing here in the spur of the moment, and I hope it doesn't sound like I'm confronting you. I hope I don't not sound like Lisa Guerrero here from Inside Edition. Hopefully I'm not, but do you mind sharing a little bit on like that, on like your views for that change, if you don't mind?
no comment.
I appreciate that. I know you also have some other like statements you would like to make, and I wanted to ask you, give you some time first of all, give you some time to share your your final views and positions into this, and then I also want to ask you if you could share after that. How can people still connect with you and communicate in the future too?
Sure. Well, while I try not to make comments like this, I believe it's very important to mention right now. I want to take a moment to encourage people in Ohio to consider voting for Senator Sherrod Brown. He's someone who truly has our best interests, I believe. I also want to encourage everyone to support Congresswoman Chantel Brown while she is currently serving. And finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention someone I have a great deal of respect for, Juan Collado Diaz. I've had the opportunities to spend time with him both professionally and personally, and I can say with full confidence that he has my full support whatever path he chooses, whether at the federal, state, or local level. More broadly, I encourage everyone to study and retain information, engage in meaningful conversations, take the time to research and reflect, support sound laws and policies, and try to have virtuous attitudes and behaviors so that everyone and everything has a fair opportunity to survive and prosper. And for more information to connect, please visit my official website at www.danielmorgan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for joining. For our listeners at home, just make sure that you visit the show notes to see Daniel's full amazing essay, which goes in so much in depth on this situation of why Christian nationalism and why it doesn't matter to pay attention to things like this today, and not just only today, in the future, and to also look into our past on how you can find that information. And I'll let Daniel also take over for a second here and share more.
Juan, before we go our separate ways, I want to take this time to express my sincere admiration for the incredible life you live. You balance so many roles with excellence as a businessman, community activist, software designer, and content creator, and more importantly, as a father, husband, relative, and friend. Also, should you ever choose to pursue a path in public office, I would be truly honored to offer my support, contribute my time and effort to your campaign, cast my vote in your favor, and serve as a dedicated member of your cabinet if that opportunity comes. I truly appreciate you and am proud of you for everything you've accomplished so far. And if possible, I look forward to hearing and seeing you prosper in the future and hope we remain connected. So thank you once again for the invitation to return, and to everyone listening, thank you again for taking the time to be here.
Absolutely. And as I said, make sure our website is, you will see everything, including Daniel's letter, which is a very important, a very important document for me because it really shows, as I said, it's more than just a letter to me. It's a statement from a friend, to the world, and for people to understand that our views, no matter who we are different. One thing, and I'm not saying this because Daniel's here, but one thing that I love about Daniel, yourself as a person, individual, and as someone in our community, is you're always willing to sit down and listen, and and agree to disagree sometimes, and that is one of the most important things in this specific times we're living in, where we are literally just suffering from ideologies, and people are left and right, not supporting each other based on those. So I want to say one more time, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for joining me for a second, episode. I know it's rare when people want to come back after they say something. They prefer to just step back and, don't talk about it. But I think I really appreciate that you decided, you were like, I want to talk about this. I want to sit down and actually go over it and share my beliefs. And I think that to you, like from me to you, it's amazing. It's huge. And it is so incredible to see that, there's still people who are willing to sit down and talk and have those conversations. Even when you and I don't agree on things, we still sit down and talk about them. We may have different views on some, like candidates or even politicians themselves, but we welcome each other's criticism, constructive or non-constructive, and we also welcome each other's ideologies, even if we don't fully agree with one another. And that's something that I want to see, not just like here today, but the world itself, everybody one day just follow and believe in, and it will make me the happiest human in this planet, as I believe it will make you probably one of the happiest humans too. So I think it will make everybody so happy. And so,
Mhm.
again, thank you so much for joining me, and those listening at home, thank you so much for listening. And I hope this episode can add more perspective to this, following on Christian nationalism and when separation of church and state series. Do stay tuned, because there is 2 more episodes on this series before I do finally close the separation of church and state series with Politico and move into something different. But until then, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you are enjoying Politico, make sure to listen and follow on all podcasting platforms. If you are interested in learning more about the topic that we spoke today, follow the show notes at www.politicopod.com. Politico is an Inquisitor Media original production hosted by me, Juan Collado Díaz. If you want to learn more about the work we do on our advocacy work, make sure to follow or visit Politico at www.politicopod.com.